There's a common belief that empires rise through brute force, armies marching, flags planted, cities burning. But history tells a different story. Some of the most powerful nations didn't start with war. They started with strategy. And sometimes, that strategy was far more devastating than any battlefield. Starting in the early 19th century, the United Kingdom faced a growing problem. It had developed a massive appetite for Chinese goods, tea, silk, porcelain, luxuries that were flowing out of China in enormous quantities. But China had no interest in British products. The only thing it accepted in return was silver. And that meant Britain was bleeding wealth. So instead of changing trade, they changed the system. In their colony of India, the British began expanding the cultivation of opium. This wasn't random. It was organized, regulated, and enforced through colonial systems that pushed farmers to grow poppies instead of food. Then, using private traders, they smuggled that opium into China. At first, it was small. Then, it exploded. Millions became addicted. Entire communities weakened. And suddenly, the flow of silver reversed, now pouring out of China and back into British hands. When Chinese authorities tried to stop the trade, destroying opium shipments and enforcing bans, Britain didn't negotiate. It responded with war. The Opium Wars forced China to open its ports, surrender territory like Hong Kong, and accept the very trade it had tried to resist. This wasn't just commerce. It was control, engineered through addiction. So, decades later, a different strategy unfolded in the Pacific. In the late 19th century, American businessmen began arriving in Hawaii. They weren't soldiers. They were plantation owners. Sugar was the prize. Hawaii's fertile land made it perfect for large-scale production, and American investors quickly built powerful agricultural operations. Over time, these businessmen didn't just grow crops, they grew influence. They dominated the economy. They reshaped local politics. And they secured favorable trade agreements with the United States that made Hawaiian sugar incredibly valuable. But there was one obstacle left: the Hawaiian monarchy. In 1893, backed by U.S. Marines, a group of American and European residents orchestrated a coup against Queen Liliuokalani. The monarchy was overthrown, and just a few years later, Hawaii was formally annexed by the United States. No large-scale invasion, no prolonged war, just economic control, followed by political takeover. Further south in Central America, another pattern emerged. Countries like Guatemala became deeply tied to American business interests, especially companies like the United Fruit Company. This wasn't just a fruit company. It controlled vast amounts of land, railroads, ports, and entire sectors of the economy. In some places, it was more powerful than the government itself. These nations became known as banana republics, economies shaped around a single export, controlled largely by foreign corporations. But what happened when a government tried to take back control? In 1954, Guatemala's democratically elected president, Jacobo Arbenz, introduced land reforms that threatened United Fruit's holdings. The response was swift. With support from the United States government, a covert operation helped orchestrate a coup that removed him from power. What followed was decades of instability and conflict. Again, no traditional conquest, but the result was the same: control over a nation's direction, economy, and future. These stories reveal a pattern. Empires don't always expand with soldiers at the front lines. Sometimes they expand with merchants, corporations, and carefully designed systems. They create dependence. They influence economies. And when necessary, they enforce control. Not always with armies first, but with strategy.